Very good morning, all. Team, we'll get started with our session. And before we start with today's session, there are two things which I would like to, request. One is team, let's try to join the session at, 7 a.m. IST, or maybe 1 or 2 minutes so that, we will get started. Because we are losing each and every minute, we are losing some things which we have to supposed to cover for today. And the second request is for today's session onward, we'll wind up at 8 a.m. IST. There are a few things which I wanted to complete. So I just thought, if we can just complete the session at 8 a.m. IST so that, we can, plan the remaining topics in tomorrow's session. Hmm? So with this, we will start with today's session. So in yesterday's session, just a recap, we talked about the content library and geography hierarchies, and we saw how to create a content library, how to edit the content library by creating new versions, and then we also saw the different categories, the recruiting context in the content libraries, and then we also saw the geography hierarchies. So we saw what is in geography hierarchy, how to create a geography hierarchy, how to modify it, and we also saw the geography structure. And Anupama, with regards to your question, I'm still yet to get some response for that. So hopefully I will try to give you the response by tomorrow in tomorrow's session.
Okay, sure, no problem.
And so in today's topic, we will start with the pre-screening questions. So pre-screening questions, I have a small PPT. So let's go through, the theoretical part of the pre-screening questions. Okay. So as part of this topic, just one second. So as I said, in today's session, we will start with pre-screening questions. Okay, so we'll have a quick introduction about pre-screening questions. So what is a pre-screening question? Why do we need a pre-screening questions? And then we have something called as disqualification questions. We will see what is a disqualification question. And then we'll have a quick comparison between the pre-screening questions and the disqualification questions. Okay? And then we'll configure questions for the recruiting module. We'll see how to configure the questions, and then we have something called as questionnaires. We'll see what is in questionnaires. And the question setup and scoring. And then we'll see how to define the pre-screening, scoring for the pre-screening questions. And there are certain privileges which are needed from the pre-screening questions perspective. Okay. We'll see what are those. And then we'll see some strategies when it comes to the pre-screening questions. Okay. So this is the topic which we have planned to cover in today's session. So first we start with a quick introduction about pre-screening questions. So pre-screening questions are, what exactly is a pre-screening question? So the pre-screening questions basically contain some questions that are specific to a job that, the candidate can answer when they are applying to a job. Hmm. So what is the use of pre-screening questions? The main use of pre-screening questions can assist in speeding up the hiring process. So how can we speed up the hiring process? By asking, the relevant questions, right? We can eliminate the non-qualified candidates through the disqualification questions, and it will also help us to identify the top candidates through some job-specific, requirement questions. Let's say, for example, we have a Java developer, or let's say we have an opening for an Oracle Fusion HCM consultant, and then we're looking for some candidates who has more than 3 years of experience working on Fusion applications. Yeah, so we can create a pre-screening question asking the candidates how many years of experience do you have. Okay. So we can just ask 0 to 3 years, 3+ years. And then if the candidate choose 3+ years, then we can give some scoring to the candidate. And then let's say as per our requirement, we need someone who has worked on minimum 2 modules. Hmm. So then what we can do is we'll create one more pre-screen question with asking question like how many modules have you worked on. Yeah. And then we can give them a list of values or check boxes with core HR, absence, ORC, talent, learn, compensation, payroll, all those modules. And then we can define some scoring based on the number of choices the candidate has made. So this kind of questions will help us help the recruiters to speed up the hiring process, and we can also create some disqualification questions, which is like very common type of disqualification questions, which is like are you age 18 and above? Hmm. So if the candidate choose no, the candidate who can be straight away disqualified because we cannot hire this candidate. Okay. So we can straight away reject the candidate. And then some customers, in some countries, they have this question like, are you legal, are you legally, can you legally work in United States? So these are some of the questions, which can be classified as disqualification questions. Hmm. So the disqualification questions basically screens out the candidates. It will be, the candidates will be straight away moved to rejected by employers phase. Okay. State of the, the first phase. And then the pre-screening candidates will pre-screening questions will help to identify the top candidates. If we have defined some scoring to the pre-screening questions, then the recruiter can use the scoring option to sort the candidates accordingly. Okay. So that's how the pre-screening questions and the disqualification questions will help the recruiters and the hiring managers to speed up the interview process. Hmm. And then, the disqualification questions, right? As we understood the concept of disqualification questions. So the disqualification questions are basically like, the single answer questions. Okay. So that contains, a minimum requirement for a candidate to be eligible for a job. Hmm. And then the pre-screening questions can be asked, they can have like, multiple response questions or like, a text box based question. So those kind of things can be asked as part of some pre-screening questions. So next we'll see a sample questions life cycle. Okay? So how do this the pre-screening or basically the questions part works? So first, like the recruiting administrator, right? They will work with the HR to create a question strategy and the guidelines. Hmm. So many people ask like Ravi, why do we need to have the steps? Okay. See, in a real-time implementations of ORC module, this pre-screening questions and disqualification questions are very widely used in by many customers. Okay. So if we don't have a proper strategy of how to create the questions and how to maintain the questions in the application, then it will become a mess very soon. Yeah. So in one of my customers, what happened is like they had five different legal entities in five different countries. Okay. And under each legal entity they have different business verticals. Okay. So what happened is when they implemented ORC, okay, they didn't had a proper strategy of how to maintain these pre-screen questions. So they started creating questions, just like that. Okay. So they started creating questions in the front end and then using from HPL, they have started creating pre-screen questions and disqualification questions. Left, right, center, they started creating. After a period of, 1 year, they had like tons and tons of questions, in their applications. Okay. And then there have been a lot of duplicates. So, for example, they hire a lot of Java developers. Okay. So when they search for a pre-screening question with like how many years of experience to have with Java, they see like 6, 7 different questions, for the same purpose. So which creates a lot of junk data in the system, right? And if we wanted to create some reporting, everything, then that's gonna create a lot of mess. Hmm. So what we did is like, once we took over as a support project, like, we eliminated all those questions. Okay. So we eliminated all the questions and we had a proper strategy and then we started creating the questions. Okay. So first thing what the customers, they have to do is before they create any questions, they have to search if the question exists or not. Okay. So we created a custom report which will help them to search the pre-screening questions with, using the keywords. Okay. And then whenever they wanted to create some questions, we had a proper strategy. Like, the question codes has to be start with, the legal employer short code, and then followed by, the business unit and followed by the question code. So we had some strategies which has helped them to, organize the questions in an effective way, and, the reporting has also become very simplified. So that's why we always suggest to, have a strategy and guidelines on how to create the pre-screening questions and the disqualification questions. So once that is done, the next step is the recruiting administrator or the content owner. They start creating the disqualification questions or the pre-screening questions in the content questions library. So once they start creating the questions, and then the recruiting administrator on the content boarder, they can attach the questions within the questionnaires on the job requisition templates. Okay. So what is a requisition template? Let's not worry about that for now. We'll see that in tomorrow's session. And then when the recruiter creates, the requisitions based on a template, or if the recruiter creates the requisition directly, Hmm. then the system will automatically attach the matching pre-screening questions and the disqualification questions to the requisitions. Okay. So just like we saw in the content library yesterday, right? We can also define some context to the pre-screening questions and the disqualification questions. Okay. So once we define the context, then based on the the context, the pre-screening questions and the disqualification questions would be added automatically to the requisitions. And then recruiter will post the requisition with disco DQ and the pre-screening questions. And then when the candidate starts applying to the requisitions, they have to complete, the application with the DQ and the all the other remaining questions. So once the candidate applies to a job requisition, the system will automatically disqualify candidates based on the DQ question responses. Yes, I'm sorry, just give me 1 second. Yeah, so sorry, team. So system will automatically disqualify the candidates based on the pre-screen question and the disqualification questions. Okay. And then once the system completes its task, okay, this recruiter will use the question answers to help with the selections. And the hiring team, basically, when I say hiring team, it could be the hiring manager or the recruiter or the collaborator. They can view the questions responses for the they can see the responses which the candidate has entered for the pre-screening questions and the disqualification questions. Okay. This is an a sample questions life cycle uh, for the pre-screening and the disqualification questions. So if you ask me, Ravi, will this be this the standard process everywhere? See, it may not be the standard life cycle, because this particular step may not have, right? But the remaining steps are like pretty much the standards. The first step alone, it's like optional based on customer to customer. But as a best practice, I will always include this first step, because that is the way, that is like one of the best way to have a better repository of the pre-screening and the disqualification questions in the system. So any doubts or questions so far, Tim? Okay. So next we'll see a quick comparison between the disqualification questions as well as the pre-screening questions. So we have some parameters in the left side, and then we have two different type of questions here. First is like the contents. Okay. So for the disqualification questions, it can be at an high level or some legal qualifiers. Okay. And when it comes to the pre-screening questions, it can be the job specific skill sets. And some of the example is like are you 18 years of age or older? Yes, this is an example for an disqualification question. When it comes to the pre-screening, like proficiency level in Java programming, or experience, or something to do with the skill sets and things like that. And when it comes to the context, okay, so yeah, the disqualification questions is we can define the context, okay, and this will determine which requisition inherits this particular question. And for the pre-screening also, we can define the context, and the same works for the pre-screening questions as well. And next, automatically apply to the requisition, which is like if the disqualification questions will be automatically added to the requisition. Yes, based on the context, the disqualification questions would be automatically added to the requisition, and once it is added automatically, we cannot remove the disqualification question from the requisition stream. So this is one important point we need to be aware of. Okay? And then when it comes to the pre-screening, yes, it would be added automatically if the pre-screening questions, right, when we are creating the pre-screening questions, if we use the classification as pre-screening questions added automatically. So there is one more classification called as, pre-screening questions added by user. If we have created the pre-screening questions using this particular classification, then these questions will not be added automatically. The user has to manually add this particular questions. Okay. And when it comes to editable by end user on the job requisition, the disqualification questions cannot be added or edited or removed from the job requisition. Okay. And then when it comes to the pre-screening questions, yes, we can able to make some changes to the pre-screening questions in the job requisition. Okay. And mandatory to candidate. The disqualification questions are always mandate. Okay. So we cannot make any disqualification questions as an optional one. Hmm. But when it comes to the pre-screening, we have this option always that if you wanted to make this question as mandate or an optional. Hmm. And when it comes to scoring, yes, like the scoring should be applied to to remove the candidate. Okay, so if you wanted to disqualify a candidate automatically, then scoring is mandate in the disqualification question. And when it comes to the pre-screening, the scoring is an optional one. If you want the recruiters to sort the candidates with the help of scores for the pre-screening, then the scores can be added. And when it comes to the configuration, right? The navigation is you have to go to setup and maintenance, and then recruiting and candidate experience in the functional area, and then the once we go to the uh, sorry, recruiting and candidate experience in the setup, and then candidate job application in the functional area. And in the right side task, right, we have to change from, the list of values has to be changed to show all tasks. Once we click on all tasks, you will see the questions taskbar. And then we need to assign the questions privilege to the appropriate roles in the user and security. Okay. So by default, the recruiter roles will not have access to the questions. Okay. The pre-screening and the disqualification questions basically cannot be accessed by the recruiters. Okay? Only the recruiting administrators they can able to access as a serial one. Okay? Some customers, they prefer the recruiters to have access to it. In such case, what we do is we take the required privileges and add it to the custom recruiter roles which we have created. Okay? And the administrator or the content owner, they can create disqualification and the pre-screening questions along with the scoring options. Next, we have the pre-screening question scoring. So the question scoring can be applied or modified when a question is created or even in the later process. Okay? The total score is calculated against the maximum possible score. So when we create the questions, we can able to see something called as maximum possible score also. We'll see that once we go into the applications. Okay? And the candidate can be filtered based on the pre-screening question score. Okay? So this is one advantage of adding scores to our pre-screening questions. So there are certain privileges which is needed in order to access this question, the questions part basically. Okay. So there are basically three privileges, and these are by default given to the recruiting administrator role. Okay. The questionnaire template, questionnaires, and questions library. These are the three privileges. And for other roles, right, we have a privilege called as update job requisition privilege. So this is basically this role is this privilege is added to the recruiter role by default. Okay. So this privilege will allow the users such as the recruiters and the hiring managers to update the job requisition to associate the questions to the requisitions. Okay. And this is by default added to the recruiter and the hiring manager role. And there are certain strategies which we follow as part of the pre-screening and the disqualification questions. First thing is the most important thing is to define a question strategy. Okay. So we'll also see some of the strategies which I have followed in my past implementations. Okay. And then we need to establish a question content owner role to oversee the questions library inputs. So some customers they would like to have a separate role for this, and some customers they would like to have some reports to see a list of questions which has been created in it. Next, we need to organize questions effectively through the classification and the context, so that only the appropriate questions are, associated with the relevant questions. See, in one of my customer, I know they are into pharmaceutical manufacturing and sales. Okay, so what they do is they create a lot of pre-screening questions, and a lot of pre-screening questions are relevant to medical industries. Okay, so they wanted to ask candidates about certain medical standards, certain medical related certifications, and things like that. So what they do is they have created lot of pre-screening questions around the same topics. Okay. And then when they create the questions, they need to add the context in the questions. Okay. So what happens is, if even if they create a requisition to hire some, the the pharmaceutical persons, right? These questions would be added to the requisition. And even if they wanted to hire some sales related people, right, then this questions is also added to the sales requisitions as well. Yeah, but it doesn't look good, right? See, when a sales candidate, when a requisition is open for sales position, okay, so obviously the people from the sales related skills and experience applies. Yeah, and they don't need to see or address, or answer pharmacy related pre-screen questions, right? So this kind of contexts are, very different. So for which business we are creating this pre-screening questions. So those kind of contacts will help to display only the relevant questions. And all the questions should have provide some, screening value. Okay. We can also use scoring at the questions library, or when assembling the questionnaires. And all the end users with the privilege should be trained to write some effective questions and answers. And users should avoid changing, the existing questions that are added from the questions library. Okay. So the reason why why we have mentioned that, avoid changing the existing question is, let's say, for example, today we would have created some question called as, what is your skills on, what is your proficiency level in Java? Okay. And tomorrow, by, if we don't need that question, okay, and we wanted something like, .NET. And let's say, for example, I'm just giving an example. Okay. So let's say if I rename that question to, what is your proficiency level in .NET? Okay. So then what will happen is, for the all the requisitions which has already used this question, right? It will change change the question and the responses at the candidate levels as well. Yep. So the question, the content of the question gets updated in all the candidate job applications and all the in all the requisitions. Okay, then the meaning of the question and the response is, has been completely tampered, right? So that's why we normally don't suggest users to change the existing questions. But if sometimes if there is any changes to make, and we suggest them to make sure the meaning of the question remains the same. Right? Because otherwise, the question and the response will not have an connection, right? So that's why we say, we limit the ability to modify the questions. Modifying a question in the library or template modifies the question everywhere it is used. So these are some strategies, which we follow when it comes to the pre-screen questions and disqualification questions. So any doubts or questions so far, team? Yeah, I see a big silence today. So you guys are aware of the topic, or is it clear, or is it like confusing?
Yes, slightly aware of topic, but things will definitely change with ORC, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm not aware of the topic, Ravi. So I'm just trying to understand. Basically, I think if you will show it in the system, it will be much easier for me to grasp. I'm just
Okay.
trying to, yeah, pick up. That's it.
Sure, guys. Yeah. So let's see from the application. Okay. So, so in order to create the pre-screening question or the disqualification questions, I'll go to setup and maintenance, and in the setup, I choose recruiting and candidate experience, and then here in the functional area, I choose job requisition, so candidate job application, and then what I do is under the show, I'll just click on the list of values. I choose all tasks. When I choose all tasks, you can able to see this one. You can see questions library, questionnaire template, questionnaires. So this, has anyone used this, but this functionalities in the Fusion model, Fusion application, like as part of your core HR or talent management?
No, I have not used it.
Okay.
Not with me also.
Sorry, Manshu.
Yeah, I have also not used it.
Okay. Right. See, these things, these topics, right? Question library, questionnaire, questionnaire template, and questionnaires. We don't only use it only in the WhatsApp. We use it in lot of modules. So to give an example, let me just go to the questions library. Once I go into the questions library, we can see all the modules which use this. If I just click on the subscribe button, you will see list of all the modules or the concepts where we use questionnaire templates and questionnaires. Okay, to starting from the welfare, general surveys, HR checklist, journeys. We use extensively for learning, and then performance, recruiting, OTL, touch points, all these modules will be using this functionality. Okay? But since we are looking from the WRC perspective, the first thing what we have to do is we have to choose the recruiting here. And before I move any forward, right, one important thing is that, see, when we talk about these functionalities to the customers, right, the customers immediately say that, Ravi, we want the recruiters to access this one. Okay. So the customer says, Ravi, we want our recruiters to access the pre-screening questions and the disqualification questions. Okay, they don't want to rely on anyone else on, on any changes or the creations. Okay. But we have to be very cautious, and we have to explicitly mention that, giving access to the questions task will give them access to all the subscribers. Okay. So we cannot able to put any data restrictions on which subscriber they can able to see them. So once they get the privilege of accessing questions library, they get to access all the subscribers, questions library. Okay? It is not only for the recruiting module alone. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So once we come here, we have to choose recruiting in the subscribers. And then once we choose the recruiting, you will, if you're using a new instance, all you see is only the questions library. And once you expand questions library, you will be seeing these 3 folders here. Okay. So you can choose your folders, and then, you can start creating the questions. So let's say, for example, when I choose application questions, once I click on application questions, you can able to see all the questions which is there. Okay. And then similarly, if I just expand, we can create subfolders as well. Okay. So now what I do is as a best practice. Okay. So let's say if the customers have the presence in 4 countries, then I create one folder for each country. And inside the country, if they have different business units, and they want questions based on the business unit, then I create subfolders again inside the country to have business units. Hmm. So that way, what will happen is it will be very helpful to uh, you know uh, display the questions here. Yeah. It will be helpful to display the questions, and if for the reporting purpose, or even for reference purpose, it will be very easy. So to create a folder, all we have to do is just click on the plus button. Okay. Let's say I wanted to create a folder under questions library. I'll just choose questions library. I click on the plus button, and then we can create a folder. So I'll just enter UNO. And under this folder, if I wanted to create subfolders, I can just click on the plus button again. So I'll just yes. pre-screening questions, and then I'll create one more folder for DQ, disqualification questions. So you can create folders like this to to store the questions based on if it is for pre-screening or if it is for disqualification. So now I go to pre-screening questions. So let me start creating some pre-screening questions. Before that, let us let us make a quick strategy of it. So basically, for our session, right, we wanted to ask the candidates like, what is the total experience in Oracle Fusion? And then we wanted to, have responses like, 0 to 2 is 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 plus. Okay? And then if the candidate if the candidate choose 6 plus years, then we have to ask the candidate, do you have any certification? Okay? Yes or no? Okay. If the candidate choose, the response as yes, then, we should get the certification copy from the candidate. Okay. If the candidate choose like, the years of experience, anything other than, 6 plus years, then we don't need to show the question or, certification. And then we have to, the next question would be, we have to ask the candidate how many modules they have worked on. And we wanted to display all the modules, and we wanted to restrict uh, that the candidate choose at least 2 modules. Okay? We wanted to enable those kind of restrictions. Okay? And then we wanted to ask some candidates like about their willingness to relocate and willingness to travel on site. So these are some questions which we wanted to create. So how will it start creating these pre-screening questions? So I'll just click on the create button, and once I click on the create button, okay, I can able to see this question code here. And if you notice, the question code is in free text box. That means that, we can rename or we can change the question code. Ideally, what I do with my customers, or what I suggest my customers to do, is to have the question code like this. Or we can have like, 4-digit question code. Okay. Let's say if the customers are present in multiple countries and, multiple businesses, right? Let's say, for example, I choose like, SA underscore PHAR underscore sales underscore 001 or underscore marketing underscore R&D. So I'll just put some, question code so that, this will help them to, filter the question codes accordingly. So now I just enter the question code. I'll just change the status to active. And next we have this owner. So who will be treated as owner? Like, the person whoever is creating the question will be treated as the owner for this question. Okay. So if required, we can choose some other person as the owner. For example, I can choose some other user as well. So why do we give importance to the owners? That's because of this option here, which is privacy. Okay. So when I click on privacy, there are 2 options. Okay. So what is in privacy? Privacy basically, like, we can select like, who can edit the question in the future. So if you choose the privacy value as private, okay, then it means that, it will permit only the owner to update the question. Okay? No one else can update the question. If you choose the privacy to public, then it means that, anyone who have access to this particular question, they can able to update it. Okay? So that's the purpose of, defining an owner and setting up the privacy. So for now, what I'll do is I'll just keep the privacy to public. Okay? Next, we have to give the question text. So let's say I'm going to start with what is your total experience in Oracle Fusion Excel. Okay. So once I enter the question, if required, we can add an image to our question as well. Okay. So if you wanted to add some image, just click on the plus button and then you can choose the file here. Okay. And you can give a title and the description to the file. So for our demo purpose, let me just quickly choose some file. So I just attach some sample image here. Once I'm done, I will just click on OK. So with the particular images added. Okay. And if you wanted to provide some instructions to this particular question, you can able to do that. Let's say, for example, how you want the response to be, or if it is a free text, like, if, let's say you wanted to restrict to, 200 characters or something like that, basically any instructions with regards to this particular question, then we can use this section. Next, we have is the question type. So what is the question type? Okay. So here we have four different type of responses. The first one which we have is the text. Let's say if you want the response of this question in a text box, okay, then you can choose this text. Let's say, for example, say something about yourself. Describe why you are looking for a change. This kind of questions you can use the question type as text. Okay. And then next we have single choice. For example, the current question which we use for your years of experience, this is a single choice. And then we have something called as multiple choices. Why do we have multiple choices? Like, for example, for this particular question, which is choose all the modules which you have experience with. And in such case, we can have multiple choices. Next, we have something called as no responses. Okay? So why do we have to create a question with no response? Okay? So we will see this particular topic, no response, once we go to the interview topics, because in interview we will again come back to the questions, because we need to create the interview feedback questions, right? So we will use the no response at that particular point of time. So for now, for our response, for our purpose, we need to have a single choice. So once I choose single choice, you see the score question checkbox is displayed. If I choose multiple choice, I can still see the score question. If I choose no response, it doesn't show. And if I choose text, it doesn't show. Because for text-based questions, we cannot define the scoring, because system doesn't know how to define the score, right? So that's why we don't have this. And we have some one more option here called as display the question conditionally. We'll come back to this particular option in a little time. Next, we have the context. So this context is very, very crucial in while creating the pre-screening and the disqualification questions. So we have question classification. So in the question classification, we have these four options. First one is disqualification. So if we wanted to create this question as a disqualification question, we have to choose this classification. And then we have two other classification for the pre-screening questions, which is added automatically, added by user. If you choose this particular question classification, then all these questions will be added to the requisition automatically based on the context. And if you choose added by user, then the user has to manually add these questions. And the last option which we have is interview feedback. So if you're creating this question for an interview feedback, questionnaires, then we will choose this particular option. We are not going to create any interview feedback questions for now. We'll come back to this particular topic once we go to the interview management. Okay, so now this particular one, I wanted to add it automatically. Next, we have candidate type. So if you want this question to be displayed to both internal and the external candidates, or only for external candidates. So this is a generic question, right? So I wanted it to be displayed for both the candidates. Next, we have our main contacts, which is all the recruiting related. So let's say if you want this to be displayed only for certain locations, then you can add the locations here. Okay. I'll just choose select. So here, let's say for example, I choose IND. Okay. So let's say I choose India. Okay. And then I can also choose multiple options. For example, I can choose options like this. I can choose options like this, click on apply. Those things would be added automatically. Okay. And once I click on OK, I can able to see this recruiting location. So any requisition which is created for this particular recruiting location, say only for those requisitions, this question would be added automatically. Okay. And for other requisitions, these questions will not be added automatically. Similarly, you can use the organization or job family side. Next, we have responses. Responses are like very critical, okay, because based on the question type which we choose, we will have responses. Okay? So in the response, you can choose like since it's a single choice, right? You can have these three different options of collecting the response from the candidate. So you can have single choice from the list, or radio button list, or radio button with image. Single choice from the list is something like this. You have to click, yeah, you will see the values here. You have to choose this one. Radio buttons, are the radio buttons, right? You will see, all the options displayed on the screen with the radio buttons. So you have to just click on any one of it. So that's the radio buttons. And the last option which we have is radio buttons with the image. That's like, you will see a radio button, and next to that, you will see the response and you will see the response here, and then you will see an image. So that's, the radio button with the image. So now let's say, I choose single choice with list. Okay. And then next you have this two checkboxes. The first checkbox, it says allow attachment. So along with your response, if you wanted to add some attachments, you can just select this checkbox here. Okay. And along with your attachments, along with the responses, along with attachments, if you wanted to add some comments, you can able to do that by selecting this checkbox. Let's say I don't want attachments, but allow comments, then you can able to do that. So you can just define this now. And next you have something called as rating model. So has anyone worked on rating model as part of your talent management, like, goals, performance? Has anyone worked on rating model?
No.
Okay. So let's say like, I wanted to create responses like, 0 to 2 years, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, and 6 plus years. Okay. And let's say I want this responses, right? If these responses are going to be standard in, many of the questions, okay, then, what happens is, let's say if, for example, if I wanted to create the responses, what I will do is I'll just click on the add button. Okay, and then I have to enter the responses here. 0 to 2 years. Okay. And then if I want to add one more thing, I'll choose it 2 to 4. Okay. So let's say like, I have to create some, 20 questions. Okay. And the responses gonna be the similar kind of options. Okay. The options which I'm gonna have for these questions are gonna be the same for all the 20, 30, 40, what are the number of questions I have, right? So in such case, right, rather than creating it manually, I can create it as a rating model. Okay. So what will happen is, let's say if I choose rating model, if I choose the rating model here, then the values are automatically populated. Okay. So that's the purpose of rating model. Okay, and this is part of the the talent management. So how to create the rating model? We have to go to setup and maintenance. We can go to setup and maintenance, or we can just go to my client group, click on show more. You will see this profile rating model. So once I click on the task, okay, you will see this rating. This is the rating model script. Okay. So here you will see all the rating models. Okay. So in order to create your own rating model, just click on add rating model, and then you can just give a code to it. So for example, I'll just put years of experience, and here put, I'll just put this one, and then I'll just choose a start date, or if not, you can just leave it blank. So next I have to add the rating levels here. I'll just click on add button. I'll just put rating level is 1 and then the name. I'll just put 0 to 2. Yes. I will have the same description. Okay. And the numeric rating, I'll just give it as 1. And then I'll just click on apply. So now I just added one photo. So next what I'll do is 2, 2, 4. Yes. Six minus and your numeric rating is 3. 4 minus 6 plus 6. Hmm. So this is how we can able to create the rating model. Okay. So once I enter this points, once I enter this ratings, right, I'll just click on the create button. Start date is Monday. I think this since this is a user account, it is giving some error. Let's just check this. So this is the classic screen of creating the rating model theme. So what we saw in the previous screen, right? That's the redwood pages, but this is the classic pages. Okay. Let me just quickly create here. Okay. So once I enter this, I'll just click on save. So once I create the rating model, I'll just go back to the questions like here. So what I'll do is I'll just create a new question. What is your total experience with Oracle Fusion? Excellent. I'm going to have single choice. And here in the rating model, if I just try to search, you will see the rating model which we have created. So the moment I choose this, we can see the rating models are automatically added. So this is the main purpose of creating the rating model. If you have the same responses again and again, okay, then we create it as a rating model, and then we use it in our questions library. Next, you have responses order. So how do you want to display the responses? Okay. So you wanted to display the responses vertically or random. So if you choose random, then what will happen is this value will be automatically changed. Okay. So that's, you can give a sample size of like, how you want the random questions to be asked. Okay. And once you define those, you can able to click on save and close. So once we click on save and close, this particular question is now created. Okay, and here if you see by mistake, I missed to update the question code. So what I'll do is just click on copy. Just put use on the on this particular question, I will delete this particular question. Okay. So the pre-screening questions or the disqualification questions, you can delete it only if you have not used these questions in any of your requisitions or templates or anywhere, right? If you have used it in some particular object, then you cannot able to delete this one. So what we can, if you wanted to create one more question, right? Let's say I wanted to ask like, what is the list of modules we have worked with? So if I want, I can click on the create button, or I can also use the copy button. So if I click on copy button, all the details would be automatically copied. Okay. So here I can just change the code ps underscore 0002. I'll change the status to active. Choose the list of modules. App. So this question, right? I don't want to be single choice. I want it to be multiple choice. So here what I'll do is I'll choose for HR or see learn talent payroll OTL absolutes compensation SWP HR health test. Okay, so these are some of the modules I just mentioned in the under the here. So here, let's say when this question is displayed to the candidates, okay, and if you want the candidates to choose minimum two questions, two responses, then you can able to do that. Okay. Minimum two modules. So in that case, how do we enable such restrictions is using this functionality called minimum number of selections. See, now coming back to the response type, right? Now I choose the question type as multiple choice. And if you see the response type, it says check multiple choices, checkbox with image, multiple choices from the list. Multiple choices from the list is what will happen. It will be the same as like this one, okay? But there will be a checkbox here. Okay? So they have to choose the checkbox from the list. Okay? Check multiple choices is like, all the choices will be displayed on the screen. Okay? They have to select the checkboxes on the screen. Okay? So, and then, the rating model, everything remains the same, comments and punishments. So, but here, if you see, we have something called this minimum number of selections. So let's say if I choose two, then, the candidate will be forced to select, minimum two check boxes. Okay? And then similarly, if you want to restrict like, maximum number, you can restrict like, the maximum number of selections. Okay? That's the purpose of, these two particular options. So once it is done, I'll just click on save and close. So now I have seen this, I've created this two options. Okay. So the next question which I wanted to is, if the candidate choose in the years of experience as 6+, then I wanted to ask this question, are you certified? So what I'll do is I'll create a question. So yes, underscore 003, set the status to active, and question text I'm gonna put it as, are you Oracle certified. I'm going to have a single choice. And once I choose single choice, I'm going to choose this particular option called display the question conditionally. Okay? I want this question to be displayed on a conditional basis. Okay? So what condition is what I'm going to choose here. So first we have to choose what is the controlling question code. So on basis of which question I wanted to display this particular question, right? So I'll choose the question code here. Here, on this, I will just click on search. So when I click on search, right, you will see all the questions here. So it would be very tough to filter our questions, right? That's why we use this code here. When I search for using it just shows me only our questions. So I will just choose this particular question here. So once I choose the question, it will display the controlling response. Right? It will display all the responses which is there for that particular question, and I have to choose which is the controlling response. So I can just choose this one, and then I'll just click on I'll add responses like yes, no. I can just add a response like this. I'll just click on save. Yeah. So this is how we can add questions to be displayed based on the prerequisites of another question. So any doubts or questions so far, team?
Ravi, you created these questions under pre-screening folder, right?
Yes.
So while you were creating it under pre-screening folder, we in the context section we got an option of classification, and there we get 4 type of classification. One was disqualification, and other rest were, I don't remember exactly the 3.
Pre-screening question added automatically, added by user.
Yeah.
And then the last one was interview.
Yes. So while we are creating these pre-screening question under the folder, like under this folder, why we are getting that option? Like, I
See,
I
this
am
folder,
yeah.
right? This pre-screening is a custom one which we have created. So the system doesn't know the meaning of this folder. It is just like, I can create a disqualification folder under the pre-screening folder. It's also.
Okay, so basically it is grouping it under.
Yeah, it is just
Okay, okay,
exactly.
okay, got it. I got it.
Okay. So, any other doubts, team? So what we have done is in today's session, we have just created, the pre-screening question. So we still have the disqualification questions and to see a demo of how these questions, displays in the requisitions, right? So what we'll do is we'll just take a quick pass for today, team, and then, we'll complete, the remaining topics in tomorrow's session, and then, uh, you know, uh, and then we'll move on to the next topics.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. So, thank you so much, guys. Then, you guys have a great day. Be safe, and let's connect tomorrow at 7 a.m. ST. And team, just a small request, starting tomorrow, right? Let's try to start the session at 7 a.m. start. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, guys.